let's go right ahead and talk about this next segment, which is going to be all about the WNBA and postseason games that are going to be happening later on tonight. So I'll see if I can update this graphic a little bit, like when these teams end up advancing and when the semifinals have actually been decided. But as of right now, you guys know Liberty and the Aces, the two top teams in their matchups. They're going to match up against each other. This is, I believe, an NBA Finals, not an NBA, a WNBA Finals rematch in the semifinals. So would not be surprised if the team that ends up winning this ends up winning the championship. However, they do have some adversaries to go up against in this matchup. They have the Lynx. They're expecting to close out against the Phoenix Mercury later tonight. Their game is going to happen at 9:30 on ESPN for those of you guys that want to tune in. The Lynx, they have a Defensive Player of the Year candidate on their team. They have a very solid defensive team. They also have a Coach of the Year candidate on their team as well. So, coaching the roster. Now, the Mercury, they do have, I guess you could say the star talents, star players on their roster. They do have Diana Taurasi at the starting position. They also have Brittany Griner at the center position, one of the more popular players in the WNBA, and, a little bit of an infamous player in the WNBA, but I'm not really going to talk much about that. And a lot of people, yesterday I noticed that in the entire group that we have, with the sports and the football podcast and all of that, a lot of people, they did not tune into a lot of these WNBA games but it was on accident because of all the football that's been going on. And again, I have to say this, I'm going to say this every single time. These WNBA playoffs should not happen during football. It just cannot. And I give credit to these people for scheduling the most important games in the playoff series on days where there's no football being played. That's much more like it, yes, but still, during the NFL regular season, nobody is going to be paying attention to the WNBA. Like I said before, Sabrina ended with 36 points. Barely anybody is talking about it because people are more focused on the NFL and a lot of news and stories that you can generate from the NFL because a lot of people are already interested in the NFL. So it's really it's just bad. It's really just bad scheduling in my opinion. And these important games, they're happening on days where there's no football. So I can give credit to that at the very least, but still that shouldn't be like that. So back to the predictions. I have a feeling that the Lynx are going to close this game out. And, a lot of people, they also, this has sort of been the trend that's been going on in the WNBA. The top seeds, they always seem to advance, and they always, it looks like that it's just going to be a repeat of what we saw last night with the higher seeded teams and advancing in the next round. And I should also explain how the WNBA playoffs are handled for those of you guys that don't know, because actually I had somebody else that was in our group, I'm not going to mention names, but he didn't know how the playoff format was structured really. And I don't blame him because the WNBA is doing a terrible job at, the scheduling, and no one's really going to be paying attention to these. So essentially the WNBA playoffs, the formatting, the first round is going to be a best of 3. However, the way that they play their games, it's not the leading team, the team at the higher seed, plays the first home game, and then you go the next series playing at the lower seeded team's home. That's not how it works. It works as the same format as the NBA, where it's the higher seed plays 2 home games, and then directly after that, the lower seed gets their home game. So since this is a best of 3, the way that this works is that the higher seed gets to play 2 home games in a row, and then the lower seed gets the final home game if you need to play a game 3 in their home. So essentially the lower seed has to steal a game in order to even have a chance of winning in the first round. The lower seed has to steal an away game. They could legitimately steal both away games, even though that's rather unlikely, especially in the NBA, but That's sort of how they're expected to win. They have to steal at least one, and that way they can go into the final game with home field advantage. And then in the semifinals, I'm pretty sure that's rather self-explanatory. They play the first two games in the higher-seeded team's home court, and then they play the next two games in the higher-seeded team's home court, and then the final game is in the higher-seeded team's home court where they have the home court advantage. So just in case any of you guys are curious as to how home court advantage works in the WNBA postseason. And like I said before, like with the predictions, I think the Lynx are going to close out the series against the Mercury. Again, it's totally possible that the Mercury end up stealing a game because they do have Diana Taurasi, but I don't think that's really going to happen. I think the Lynx the last game that they played against the Lynx ended up winning 102-95. So it's going to be close, but I think the Lynx are going to end up closing out the series. And now we move on to the most popular game of the entire WNBA that's going to happen. Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever, I should say, against the Connecticut Sun. This matchup right here, I have no doubt, is going to be the most viewed playoff game in the entirety of the WNBA playoffs. Mainly because it's going to happen at 7:30, so everybody's going to be either at home and either doing nothing at a late night on Wednesday, not watching football, so they're going to turn on whatever is on ESPN. Lo and behold, it's Caitlin Clark. I have a feeling that this game is going to draw in a lot of viewership, especially since I'm expecting a huge game coming in from Caitlin in this elimination game. And, that might be a lot to ask, especially coming from a rookie, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we have at least one good competitive series in the WNBA postseason that can draw in its attention. And if there's any matchup that's going to do that, it's going to be the Fever against the Sun. Now, the Sun ended up destroying the Fever in the last game. The Sun ended up winning 93-69 in their last matchup. So it might be a little bit, what's a good word? Ludicrous to even assume that this could happen given the performance that they played. But I'm just really faithful with Caitlin Clark. I mean, I think she's going to ball out in this game, especially after losing and being really bad in the last game. I think she's going to just turn it completely around and force a game 3, so that way the Fever have a chance of actually winning this series at home. And if the narrative plays out, then Caitlin Clark would have won a playoff game and Diana Taurasi would have lost a playoff game, meaning that Caitlin Clark has had a much better season than Diana Taurasi by default. And that's my ultimate goal. I know I sound like a big Diana Taurasi hater, but really the reason why I feel this way about Diana is because of how she's treated Caitlin Clark. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The way that this woman introduced Caitlin Clark into the WNBA was incredibly unfair. It was a total act of jealousy, in my opinion, and it shouldn't have any place in the sports league. Yes, you can say that the league it's way tougher than it is, but you also have to give credit to where credit is due and actually, praise her for the good that she's done for this league. And not a single WNBA athlete has done that. And it's really it's a tragedy, in my opinion, because it's dividing the WNBA and it's dividing its fans. And that's not something that you want, especially for the WNBA. You all need to be behind the same person, and you all have to be behind the same purpose of bringing the WNBA recognition and notoriety that it deserves. But alienating yourself, and trying to alienate Caitlin Clark is not helping you. It's only making it worse. And I honestly because I'm all for I really like the fact that Caitlin in this entire season has just completely proved Diana wrong. And if she can win a postseason matchup, meanwhile Diana loses the postseason matchup, she could end up proving her even more wrong. And this is a big if the Mercury somehow are able to advance after being down in the series 1-0, and the Fever are also able to advance, we are going to have one of the most epic WNBA playoff matches ever. Old versus new, Diana versus Caitlin. We can finally see who is the better athlete currently right now in the WNBA, and that is going to be a matchup that everybody is going to want to tune into. And I would very much be looking forward to a matchup between the Mercury and the Indiana Fever. That would be amazing. And I really hope that that's what happens. And if that doesn't happen, then that's totally fine, because I wouldn't mind the Fever advancing in the next round. Even though for this matchup, I think this is going to 3 games. I'm sticking with it. I think the Fever and the Sun, they're going to end up going to 3 games, but the Lynx, they're going to end up closing out this series against the Mercury in this final game, win the series 2-0. And I'm sticking with that. I'm going to stick with that with my predictions. So let me know in the comments if you guys agree with those predictions, or if you guys think I'm being rather ridiculous, because I will admit that the Fever prediction is entirely based on optimism and just the expectation that Caitlin Clark is going to perform in this matchup. If she doesn't perform, then the Sun are going to end up winning this game. But aside from that, that's all that I have for this second segment. So now we'll go ahead and go into the third segment, where I talk about the Lakers and the starting lineup. JJ Redick recently just announced the starting lineup and who's going to start for the Lakers. And so I'll talk a little bit about that right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned if you guys are interested.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.